We are starting a new unit now, which is going to be weathering, erosion, and deposition. In this lesson specifically, we're going to learn about the process of weathering and how weathering can be physical, biological, or chemical in nature. Now to start, any type of weathering is simply the process of taking a larger rock or object and breaking it down into smaller pieces. On this slide, all the way on the left, we are showing a large rock which has been cracked into two different ones, and at the base of this rock you can see you have different pieces of smaller rock, which demonstrates the weathering process. On the right side, you're showing an example of physical weathering called frost action, as water gets into the cracks of rocks. As the water freezes into ice and the ice expands, it pushes the rock apart into different pieces, resulting in weathering. Now, weathering by nature is the exact reason why we have different types of sediments. Last unit, you learned that sediments can compact and cement together to form clastic sedimentary rocks. Sediments range in all different sizes, from boulders, which can be basketball-sized rocks or larger, all the way down to the smallest sediment type, which is clay, which can't even be seen by the naked eye. If you take a large boulder and you expose it to weathering processes, that boulder will break down into smaller rocks, which can be possibly cobble-sized, which is very similar to a baseball-sized rock. If you take a cobble, break it down due to processes of weathering, a cobble can turn into a pebble, which is a jelly bean-sized rock. If you keep breaking these sediments down into smaller pieces, that's how you can get different classifications of sediments. Now, one example of weathering is called physical weathering, and basically physical weathering is you're breaking down a large rock into smaller pieces without actually changing the composition of the rock. You might have very small pieces of sediment that result, but all those pieces of sediment are the same composition of the original rock. A common example of this can be seen with the rock called sandstone. Sandstone is a sedimentary rock that is formed from compacting and cementing sand sediments. But if you take a whole piece of sandstone, expose it to physical weathering, over time that sandstone will turn into smaller sand sediment pieces because of physical weathering. A very common example of physical weathering can be found in nature. Trees and their roots are actually very strong, and you can see in this image how the tree and its roots have literally cut this rock into half. That's physical weathering. The rock has been broken down into smaller pieces. Another example of physical weathering can be seen even around your neighborhood. You have trees and their roots that are expanding through the sidewalks and cement, which causes it to break apart into smaller pieces and becoming weaker. Physical weathering in your very own neighborhood. Now, a very common example of physical weathering that we can see in New York State is the formation of potholes due to the process of frost action. So this video is going to show you how a pothole can form.
Here's a look at the making of a pothole. Water seeps through the cracks in pavement. It builds up, softens the road base, then freezes. As the ice expands, it pushes the pavement up. When the water dries, a hole is left beneath the roadway. The weakened pavement then collapses under the weight of traffic, leaving a pothole in the roadway.
Now, another example of physical weathering is the process of abrasion. When sediments are transferred in the environment through wind and water, those sediments can start to hit each other as they're traveling, and as they're hitting each other, they start to become rounded out in shape. So this animation is going to show you this process. Now, an example of chemical weathering is when you are breaking down a rock through chemical means and changes. The result is not the same as the original rock. You just don't have smaller versions of the original rock. After chemical weathering is done, there is some sort of chemical change. Now, if you remember from last unit, there are three rocks that react with acid: limestone, dolostone, and marble. We have a lot of these rocks out in nature, and when acid rain hits these rocks, you get a chemical reaction and chemical weathering can result. This image is showing a statue before and after exposure to acid rain. This statue is made up of marble. On the left, you can see that the statue has a clear face and also clear hand and arm structures. If you look on the right side after being exposed to acid rain, you can no longer see the face of the statue, and the arm and the hand structures are completely missing. That's the best example we have here of chemical weathering. Another example of chemical weathering is the formation of caves. If you remember, the brick symbol represents the rock limestone, which reacts with acid. The ground in the diagram is made up of entirely limestone, and when that acid rain hits the ground and seeps into the limestone, it starts to dissolve it and it breaks it down, leaving holes, forming cave structures. So in this animation, I'm going to show you what happens as your acid rain dissolves into the Now, finally, one example of chemical weathering is found in sinkholes. Sinkholes are formed in the ground when acid rain infiltrates a surface made up of rock like limestone, causing the limestone to dissolve. Because the limestone is dissolving, the ground is getting weaker and can no longer support the weight of the structures above it, causing everything to sink in to cause a sinkhole. Now, the video that I'm going to show you to end this presentation is going to be a little bit choppy. It's going to show you guys how different sinkholes have formed throughout the world. If you're interested in watching the whole video, I provided the link on the notes for this topic.
Welcome back to Top 5s. Today we're doing the top 5 largest sinkholes captured on video. Number 5. A man in Russia is on his way to work, but suddenly he notices something unusual take place in front of him. A large cement truck sinks into the street. According to authorities, this event was actually caused by a small sinkhole. Luckily, however, the driver managed to escape unharmed. A large chunk of road falls away, revealing a massive sinkhole. This must be the worst time to be stuck in traffic, but thankfully everyone eventually manages to get out of danger. Number 3. In 2012, authorities in Louisiana investigate a report of a sinkhole which was concerning nearby residents. They approach the sinkhole in a small boat, and then amazingly witness the sinkhole expanding in front of them. The sinkhole swallows up trees like butter and turns the lake into a mixture of dirt and debris. Authorities believe an underground salt cavern may be responsible for creating the sinkhole.